And he wrote, "Bring on the Dodgers, a super team that's good for baseball." Mr. Scott Lauber on the Comcast Business Hotline. How are you today, Scott?
I'm doing well. How are you guys?
Doing well. Appreciate you coming on. And I want to ask you about this because it's something interesting. You mentioned how the Dodgers, in your story, I just mentioned the title, people can go read. You mentioned that they're a Goliath, and you think that they're good for the game of baseball. Obviously, this is a big series, but start with that. Why do you think the Dodgers being so good and being that Goliath is good for the sport?
Well, a few reasons. I mean, number one, and I think you could say this about the Phillies as well. In fact, I know you can. The Dodgers want to win, right? I mean, they're trying. Yeah. They're trying really hard. This is a team that won the World Series last year and then goes out and spends like $1 billion in the offseason to add Blake Snell and Roki Sasaki and bring back Teoscar Hernandez and sign Michael Conforto and add Tanner Scott and Kirby Yates. Like, it feels like every other player who signed a contract this year signed it with the Dodgers. And you know, you find yourself going like, oh, my God, like, you know, how many players are the Dodgers going to sign? But at the same time, like, don't you admire the fact that they're not stopping? They're not stopping just because they won the World Series last year. So that's number one. And number two, I just think a super team in any league is good for the league because they provoke conversation, they provoke opinion, like them or not. Like, everyone's going to get fired up when the Dodgers come to their town this year, and it's going to be an event. So everyone's going to want to see Ohtani and Mookie Betts, and I think it's good to have that team exist in your sport because it brings attention to the sport. It brings attention to, it brings added interest. I think it's a good thing to have a kind of a team that everyone's sort of gunning for. And then the third reason is that in baseball, the team with the highest payroll doesn't always win the World Series. In fact, very rarely wins the World Series because, you know, while over 162 games, that team might have the depth and the talent to get to the postseason, you know, in a best-of-5 or best-of-7 series, it doesn't necessarily translate. So, you know, the Dodgers have won their division for 11 of the last 12 years, and they've got 2 World Series to show for it. So, super team or not, it doesn't guarantee them a championship by any means.
Yeah, when you look at the Phillies and this Dodgers team, I mean, they kind of look a little similar, and they both have really good starting pitching, and they both have pretty good bullpens. But when you look at the lineups, how do you even look at the matchups and try to compare these two teams?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of hard. I agree with you. I think that they do look a lot alike in a lot of different ways. I mean, you know, the Dodgers won't have Freddie Freeman here this weekend. He went on the injured list yesterday. So, you know, ordinarily when you'd have Ohtani, Betts, and Freeman at the top of your order, you know, you think about, like, around the league, like, how do you match up with that? And I don't know, Schwarber, Turner, Harper, in whatever order you want to put them in, does a pretty good job of matching up with that. So, you know, I think both teams have real good tops of the lineup, and I think they both can make a claim that they go pretty deep 1 through 9. But there are going to be guys, you know, we talk about Bryson Stott and Brandon Marsh, you know, as two guys who, if they have better years than they had last year, the Phillies offense could be, you know, X% better than it was last year. Well, the Dodgers, I'm sure, look at it the same way, and they say, well, you know, if you get Conforto having a really good year, or if you get, I mean, I think they know that they're going to get a good year out of Will Smith, but, like, you know, the Will Smiths and the Max Muncies and the Confortos and the, you know, sort of the players who fill in the rest of those spots, you know, if you get those guys having big years, then it makes you even better. So I do think the teams are sort of mirror images of each other in a lot of ways. And, you know, it does make you wish you could sort of hit fast forward and just go to October and watch them square off in a short series because, like I said, there are no guarantees that either of them get there for as good and for as talented as they are.
So looking at just this weekend, Scott, you heard some of the things about the Phillies, and a lot of people were worried about this season. Basically, there were a lot of fans that told us, well, the season won't matter because they're not as good as the Dodgers. So how important, in your opinion, even though it's very, very early, that it's a good competitive series from the Phillies, not automatically sweeping it or even winning it, but making it clear that they're in the same ballpark of this team. How important is that this weekend, you think, for the fans?
Well, I mean, the Phillies won 5 out of 6 from the Dodgers in the regular season last year. Mm-hmm. And, kind of caught the Dodgers at a good time because the Dodgers were not at full strength. I don't think Mookie Betts played in any of those games. They never faced Yamamoto, who they'll face tonight. They didn't face I don't believe they faced – maybe they faced Kershaw one time. I mean, the Dodgers definitely were not at full strength. The Phillies won 5 out of 6, and I don't know. I mean, the Dodgers were really good last year too, and I don't know if that made Phillies fans puff their chests out anymore and say, like, we can hang with the Dodgers. I think you know. I mean, I think they know that they can hang with the Dodgers. I really do. Like, internally, I don't think they have any doubt about that or any question about that. Now, is taking 2 out of 3 this weekend going to make fans feel better? Maybe. Probably. If they lose 2 out of 3, is it going to make fans feel worse? I mean, I'm sure you're going to get calls who say, like, well, the Dodgers are still much better, and it's still got to go through the Dodgers, and how are you ever going to beat the Dodgers? You beat them 5 out of 6 last year, and they wound up winning the World Series, and you did. So, it's kind of early. What is interesting to me is that they face each other this weekend, and then not again until September. And I think that's odd. Usually, the 2 series you play against teams out of your division are closer together than that. It'll be interesting to kind of keep an eye though on the Dodgers and wherever they go from here for the rest of the year, because I think that they are kind of a team that other good teams and other contenders are going to measure themselves against, and I think that you're going to want to sort of keep an eye on what they look like as they go forward, like who gets hurt, how much attrition affects their pitching staff. The incredible thing about the Dodgers to me is their depth, and they started the season with, I think, 11 players on the injured list, and they're 8-0, and they're going to get some of those guys back, and can they possibly get even better than they already are? So, I think maybe it goes a long way to maybe making the fans feel better, but I think internally the Phillies feel they can hang with the Dodgers any day of the week.
All right, I want to get your thoughts on the Phillies bullpen right now. I think, number one, I mean, I look at the bullpen, and I think it's usually 4 strong. I don't really like what I've seen from Strom lately, and can you start there? He just has not looked right.
He hasn't, and by all accounts, he's healthy, which is the most important thing. I wonder, Ricky, whether, and you probably know this better than you certainly know this better than I would. Like, he missed 10 days in spring training because of the shoulder. In terms of, like, he went 10 days without throwing in spring training. Then he started throwing, but did not get into a Grapefruit League game. So I wonder whether these first few outings are kind of like spring training for him, in terms of, like, getting on the mound in game situations that he just, his last spring training game, I think, was March 6th. So he went a long way. He went like 3 weeks at the end of spring. I wonder if that is some of what we're seeing, where, there are some nights where the velocity is there and some nights where it's not. That kind of feels a little spring training-ish to me. So I do kind of wonder about that, but he says he's healthy. They say he's healthy. I think if that's the case, as long as that's the case, then they can probably just say, well, it's just a case of him kind of getting up to speed here.
Scott, looking at Kyle Schwarber, Rick and I were talking about him. He's just a player that him and I really like, and he starts off so well when he usually isn't such a hot starter. Do you think this is just an example of him just playing well? Is it contract year? Like, why do you think he's off to such a good start? Because it looks like he's healthy, which he hasn't always been to start the season, and he's definitely making great contact so far.
Yeah, he's healthy. He's in great shape. I thought he was in better shape last year than he was in 23. He's in as good or if not better shape this year than he even was last year. I mean, I think he's just a really good hitter. He's just a really good hitter. He's a really smart hitter. I know people look at it and they go, and I, from the outside, I kind of looked at him before he came to the Phillies as, a 3 true outcome guy, a guy who was going to be homer, strikeout, walk, and wasn't going to hit for much average, and it was kind of like the modern hitter, and he's a way smarter hitter than I ever gave him credit for. So, I think that he's just a guy who I think is kind of putting it all together. Maybe it's a contract push, but look, I mean, he's a guy who hits 40 homers a year, and I think he'll be right around that number again. So, he's off to a great start, and maybe June Schwarber doesn't have to be maybe it's April Schwarber now. Maybe June Schwarber shows up a little early.
That's not a bad thing. I just got to ask you, because one guy who's been playing his butt off, and he's not a regular, Edmundo Sosa. I mean, this guy's been everything you could ask for.
Yeah, he really has. And, I think the thing that impresses me the most is his acceptance of his role. He's a guy who might be able to start on some other teams. He might be able to go be an everyday shortstop on a second division club, and he's not that here, obviously. And it's not something that like eats at him, I don't think. Like, sure, would he like to play every day? Of course he would. But he also understands he's on a really good team. He's got a role to play here. And his role is, whenever they call on you to play, you got to be ready to go, whether that's to fill in for Trey Turner for a few days, or in the case of last year for 6 weeks, or whether that's to maybe go make a start against a tough lefty and go play second base. He's worked on trying to learn how to play the outfield. I wouldn't be surprised at some point this year if we see him out in left field against a tough lefty, to maybe get Marsh out of the lineup for a day or Kepler out for a day. And I mean, just the fact that he wants to be here, he wants to win with this group, and he'll do what it takes to do that. I think is really super impressive, and that's half the battle, because not only do you have to be a good player to do well in that role, but you also have to understand the role and accept that role, and not always be kind of looking for the next thing or looking for what's around the corner. And he's sort of been a really good teammate all these years. He's one of the most popular guys in the clubhouse. You hear a guy like Zach Wheeler, who's not like a smoke blower, right? Like, Zach Wheeler's not there to serve up for people with cameras, says the other night, like, man, Sosa's one of my favorite players to watch. And when a guy like Wheeler says that, it kind of tells you a little bit about how Sosa's respected for his work ethic and what he does. So, I don't think it's any coincidence that when he does get his opportunities to play, he usually does something to help make an impact. Would he get exposed if he played every day, and got 500 at-bats in the season? He might. I think he did earlier in his career with the Cardinals. Maybe he gets that chance again somewhere else down the road. But for right now, he's perfectly happy doing what he does, and he's a real valuable player to the Phillies for that. Like, he sort of describes himself like an NBA sixth man. Maybe he's the Phillies' 10th man, and I think that's a really kind of healthy way to look at it if you're in that role.
Well, we really appreciate all the great stuff, Scott. Once again, people should read Bring on the Dodgers, a super team that's good for baseball. You can read that at Inquirer.com/sports. Really appreciate it, Scott, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thanks, guys. Talk to you soon.
All right. That was Scott Lauber on the Comcast Business Hotline. Thanks so much, everybody, for watching. Really appreciate it. If you want more of this content, make sure you like and subscribe. And you can do that kind of over here if you want more of the best show ever.